there ladies, this is going to be the tutorial for making the watercolor effect in Photoshop. So taking one of your digital photographs and then making it look like it's a watercolor painting. Now to start, you should have looked at the tutorial on blend modes and filters just to get a sense of what those different effects can do. And then you also should have in Canvas downloaded the watercolor brushes and downloaded the bridge photograph because we'll all work on the bridge photograph to start. And then later you can do this with your own photograph. But just to learn all the steps, let's all work on the same photograph. So you should have those downloaded to your computer, and I'll show you how to upload the brushes into Photoshop. And one thing to remember is that as we do a tutorial in Photoshop, my computer might at some points look different than yours. So if it does, just pause the tutorial, try and figure out what the difference is. If you can't figure it out, go ahead and ask a friend. And then if you still can't figure it out, if your classmates can't help you, then I would just try and Google the problem. Most times you can find a forum where someone will have an answer to your question. And usually we're not doing anything difficult, so usually the solutions are pretty simple. But I will say that just be prepared that at some point I'll have a dialog box that you don't have, or vice versa, and it's no big deal. Just try and problem solve it, and you'll be able to figure it out. So let's start by doing File New. That's how we want to start most of our projects, because that way we can control the size of what we're going to make and the resolution. So let's make this 8 by 10, but I want to do the landscape. And 300 resolution is perfect, and RGB color is fine for now. So I will go ahead and then make this document watercolor tutorial, and hit create. I was just on the brush tool, so that's why we have this is highlighted over here, and that's why I get this funny little shape. I'll just go off that tool for a second. So we want to do File New because we want to have a background that's just blank and locked. That'll be a little helpful for this. Now you want to go to File, and if you want to add a photograph, you go to Place Embedded, and wherever you downloaded that bridge photograph to, now you just have to go find it. So mine was downloaded to downloads. You might have put it on your desktop in your folder, but just go ahead and find that photo and go ahead and open it. And what Photoshop does is it's going to open up an image to the widest dimension of your document. So the widest dimension of mine is this 10 inches going all the way across, but this is a very high-res photo. So I know that I can make it a little bit larger without losing image quality. So I'm going to take that corner and drag it up and then move the image down, and I end up cropping it a little bit, but I know it's going to still hold its clarity. So I can either hit the check or I can also hit return on my Mac, either one, but that will accept the place embedded photo. And you might notice you have an icon down here. If you hover over this, it says Smart Object Thumbnail. Don't worry about smart objects just yet. We'll get into them a little bit later. You can convert images to smart objects and do different things with them, but they are also limited. Sometimes you have to convert it out of a smart object, but you just might notice that, so don't let it panic you. So the first thing we're going to do is get right into filters. Let's go up here to filter, and we're going to go to the filter gallery. Click on that. And let's start out with the dry brush. So when you have a screen like this, you might remember this from playing around, but you have your preview over here on the left, and you can make that zoom out or in to see what the effect is going to get you. And then for every option, you have all these different sub options and scales. So for brush size, let's make that 10. Let's make the detail also 10. We can leave the texture at 1. And go ahead and hit OK. And this is going to be important. You want to make sure that you have the sub options on this is your layer, and then you have all these subcategories of a filter and a smart filter. You want to make sure you're seeing those. If you're not seeing those, it's probably because you didn't have a background layer. So you want to start over from the beginning and follow all the directions. But if you follow the directions, you should have this smart filter being visible, because we'll want these little filter options later on. And for now, what we can do is go back up to filters. Let's do the next filter. We're going to keep making this image more and more digital looking to help make it look like a watercolor. So we'll go back to filter gallery, and then let's go to cutout. And that really gives us some nice definition. We can zoom out to see how it's looking for the whole image. And we can make the number of levels 5. The edge simplicity is good at 4. And edge fidelity is also good at 1. So we have 5, 4, 1. And then you can go ahead and hit OK. And now this is why these are important. We're going to go to the setting modes for the filter gallery. We're going to go to the one on the top. Now double click these blending setting options. And we're going to take this mode and we'll make this one pin light. And now what we can do is we'll go back to filters. And now let's go down to blur and let's go to smart blur. And here we can do, let's keep the radius at 5. Let's have the threshold at 100. And let's make sure the quality is on high and the mode can be on normal. And let's go ahead and hit OK. Perfect. Again, it's very subtle differences. This is going to be a big help down the road. And now let's go to the smart blur. And let's change the blend mode for this. Okay, let's make this blend mode. Let's try screen. And let's try 50% opacity. That looks pretty good. Let's hit OK. Yeah, it's made it a little bit lighter, which is nice. And okay, now what we want to do is, you know when watercolors have those really dramatic edges? Let's go back to filter. And let's go to stylize, and let's go to find, oops, lost it, stylize and find edges. So this shows you all those edges you get when you do watercolor paint. So you want to kind of highlight those. So let's go to this, find edges. Let's go to this setting. Double click on that. And let's make this mode multiply. See how it keeps all those really dark edges for all the color borders? That's going to be really helpful. So we hit OK. And now what we can do is we can add our paper. So we have that watercolor paper image. We can go to File, Place Embedded. And again, remember just where you saved it. Mine was saved in Downloads. So I'm in Downloads over here. Now this photo is a lot smaller. You can see it was a pretty small file size. But that's going to be okay because there's not a lot of important detail on this page. It's more just trying to get a texture. So for that reason, I'm not super concerned about how small of a file it is. But you want to take it, you want to make it the full size of your document window, and you want to either hit the check or hit return. And for this, we want this blend mode for the layer, not for, there's no sublayer for this one. There's no filters for this paper. But for this layer, let's make it multiply. Nope, go back. Multiply. Okay, so you can kind of see changes it quite a bit. because this one is on top. So you should, if there was no multiply layer when it's normal, you just saw the white paper, but multiply really lets a lot of that bottom image bleed through. But now you also see that kind of paper texture happening just a little bit. So now let's go to our original photograph. Let's click on this photograph. What we want to do now is we want to make a masking layer, but we don't need a masking layer for a selection. We did selected mask because masks are really helpful for making selections, but masks will do a lot more than just that. So down here, if you want to make a selection mask, or if you want to make just a mask with no selection, there's a shortcut for that. Down here, we have all the different things we can do to a layer. We can delete a layer, we can add a new layer, we can group layers, we can add adjustment layers, or adjustments to a layer. And here, the rectangle with the circle, we can add a layer mask. So you want to click on that, and now we have a layer mask. Remember with the masks, the little rhyme for that is black will conceal and white will reveal. So we want to paint this whole mask with black. Now we could do it by making our black fill, or our fill, making the fill here black, and taking the paintbrush and painting it. But there's a much faster way. If you just have this the way it's clicked when you made it, it should just be highlighted with the mask should be selected. If you hold down Option and Delete, it'll fill the whole thing with black. So they did a couple things. It filled the layer, the mask, with black, but also it really dramatically changed our top layer, because now what happens is you can barely see to the bridge. And what we'll do to make the watercolor effect is now, this is a really fun part, is we will, remember if you want to now see through this mask, you have to paint on it with white. White will make the image come through. So we want to reverse our colors so white is on top. We want to go to our brush tool, and now I want to select some of our new brushes. Your default brush is like these, but these do not look like watercolors. If you do this, let's make it smaller. Like that does not look like a watercolor brush. So Command Z to undo that. So what we want to do is go down to our brand new watercolor brushes. Let's try a subtle one like this to start. And this is going to be just you playing around. You don't have to do the same brush as I do. You don't do the same brush strokes that I do, of course. Just see what kind of works for you. And change the size of this a little bit. You can also change the opacity. With these watercolor brushes, they're already kind of thin to begin with. You can tell that they're a little grayed out compared to, like this brush is super white. So that would be a really strong saturated color. These are a lot thinner. These are watercolors that are a lot thicker. So they're trying to replicate how the paint sits on the brush. So for that reason, and you know how watercolors will get all layered looking, so sometimes the edges it's nice to be really light. But we can keep changing the brush, we can keep changing the opacity. That's really large, and I don't like how this brush has a really hard corner edge. I'm not a fan of that. It's a really dramatic size difference. Let's do some larger ones. Basically, you're just going to start painting in your photo and try and make it look like a little bit of a watercolor painting. No, let's not change the mode. Sorry. Let's keep it on brushes. Let's try this one. That was a nice large impact. Just keep doing this until you have an image that you like. Remember, if you don't like some brush strokes, I wouldn't do too many after. If you have one that you're not sure of, then you might want to stop and think about it, because if you want to go back in history, remember, you'll lose. You can't just like keep this one. Like, I don't think this one looks good. If I want to get rid of this, then I have to get rid of everything below it, which I think I will do because they're just really bad. That's fine. So you can go to the edge if you want to. You can stay within the edge. If you decide that you end up having an error, like this bottom no longer looks like a watercolor. So if I want to lighten this bottom left corner, all I have to do is reverse my brush color to black. And if I start doing that, I can get rid of it. Because remember, black will hide it. And I can also go back into a brush that has, oops, I keep going to the mode, sorry about that. I can go back into a brush that has a nice opacity. You can change the size of the brush. And then once I've gotten rid of any mistakes, I can go back to white and go back to the brush mode and keep adding more color. You can see my most recent brushes will sit up here, but I can take this slider to pick all the other brushes. Let's try one of these thin ones. It has a nice little brush look to it. And I do have kind of a hard line right here, so I'll go in and get rid of that. But this is what you're going to do to make a little watercolor effect. So if you've done it on the bridge and you're happy with the bridge, then what I want you to do is pick a photograph from your homework and try this on a photograph from your homework. Maybe talk to a classmate about which photograph you should use to see if you can help them, or they can help you decide which one is best for it. But you will probably not be able to do exactly what this tutorial said. So for instance, when you're doing all your filters and your preview of the filters, look at the scales and see what's going to work best for your photograph. You might have to go back and make some adjustments and change some of the scales to work better for what you're doing. So don't worry if you do all the same steps in your photograph you don't think looks as good. That's fine. It just means that you'll have to get used to using the filters and seeing how you can adjust them to your individual images. But that's pretty it. It's a very simple tutorial with a lot of filter activity, so I hope you had fun with it. Can't wait to see what you do. You want to take the bridge photograph that you did, and you want to save that, and you want to upload that to Canvas, the tutorial. Your original photograph, you'll upload to a different assignment, but this bridge that you make here in class, do File, Save, make sure that you have it saved as like your name and watercolor tutorial, and then make sure you upload that to Canvas, to the watercolor tutorial assignment. All right? And again, if you have questions, try and get them answered by your classmates or by Googling online. And see you ladies tomorrow.